Caine is hiding something he doesn't want us to know in the amazing digital circus. Throughout the show, he has said multiple things that come across to me as suspicious.
Where I saw
digital hallucinations! Your NPCs, but if I start losing track of who's a human and who's an NPC, who knows what could happen?
And I think that there is definitely something that Caine doesn't want us to know. So today, I'm gonna be analyzing the show, and at the end of this video, we're gonna find out what Caine is truly hiding from us. But first, let's talk about the biggest thing that stood out to me in episode 2. We see even less of Caine in episode 2 than we do in the first episode, but we can still take away a few key things from this episode about Caine. At the beginning of episode 2, Caine is incredibly quick to get rid of everyone except for Zooble. Once everyone is inside of the Candy Canyon Kingdom, they meet the Candy Queen, and she immediately says that they must be the brave knights sent by God to help them with the recent catastrophe.
You must be the brave knight sent to us by God to help us with our recent catastrophe.
And I think that there are some things that we could take away from this. The first thing is the obvious biblical references that continue all the way up even into this episode. And this is now becoming a more common theme in the show, because we know in the pilot episode there was a biblical reference when it panned up to the CNA sign, and many people theorize that this sign stands for the biblical story Cain and Abel. But now with another reference to God in the show, I feel like this theory is even more likely. But what if I told you that Cain somewhat sees himself as God, either in a literal or figurative way? Cain, however, does have a lot of powers that would suggest he is somewhat of a god in the amazing digital circus. First of all, he's somewhat opient, meaning he knows at least slightly what's going on with everyone, which is one of the more known powers of the biblical god. Next, he can create just about anything that he wants, and make anything that he wants to happen, which is again another power that the biblical god is known to have. One more thing, which is less of a power but more of a parallel to the biblical god, is that Cain, for the most part, lets the humans have free will, but guides the humans to do what he wants them to do. In the Bible, it's stated that God will not force a person to follow him, but will let them ultimately come to their own conclusions, while guiding them along the right path. While Cain isn't necessarily trying to guide the humans into everlasting life and salvation, like in the Bible, the digital circus is somewhat similar to it, but something to note is that the God of the Bible created heaven and rules over it, and I think the same can be said for Cain. This brings up a whole lot more questions for the show. Just think for a moment what we know about Cain. He's supposedly an AI put in the amazing digital circus to be a ringmaster, and works on it actively, as evidenced by the exit doors and the void, both being unfinished things that Cain is embarrassed about. But I think that everything we know about Cain on surface level is a lie, and I'm gonna tell you exactly why. It all stems from this clip right here. There's one thing in this clip that's very important. As I've previously said, the blue logo that says CNA on the wall is what we're looking for here. If the biblical references weren't enough for you, here you go, because the leading theory for what CNA stands for is actually a biblical reference to the story of Cain and Abel, the two sons of Adam and Eve. And if you didn't know, the story is that Cain and Abel both brought their sacrifices to God. While Abel brought forth his best meat for God in exchange for the forgiveness of his sins, Cain only brought God a variety of fruit, most likely not the best ones either. Because of Cain's unwillingness to put forth his best, God found favor upon Abel, and did not accept Cain's sacrifice. Because of this, Cain killed his brother Abel out of jealousy, and after this happened, God punished Cain by forcing him to become a wanderer and fugitive on Earth. While I'm not exactly saying that Cain offered God fruit and killed his brother, I think it's worth noting the similarities between the Bible and the amazing digital circus, as well as what this could mean for possible plot points. Now think about it. Why would the company be called CNA? Basically a direct reference to Cain and Abel, and have nothing to do with Cain from the digital circus. Well, that's the thing. It has to be on purpose. I don't think they would drop a clue like this just for it to be a red herring. But nonetheless, it's definitely at least a parallel to other things that are going to be important later in the show. And mark my words, guys, I guarantee that in the later episodes, there are going to be more and more references to Cain being God. Because this is the thing that the circus members really need to realize to escape escape the circus. But there's actually one person who knows this. One person who was absolutely hated in the second episode, and that would be Jax. Now, if you didn't know, Jax was acting incredibly different in the second episode. In the first episode, he was just witty, and was kind of picking on all of the other circus members. But in the second episode, he seems very mean-spirited, and tries to bully and hurt all of the circus members for his entertainment. And a lot of people actually dislike Jax for this. But what if I told you that him doing this is actually really smart? Jax is probably the only character who has the right approach. It's like he has the final mentality they'll all have if they were there long enough. As in that all of the side quests are basically a waste of time to keep them busy. Even the parts with NPCs becoming self-aware may have just been scripted to play with the emotions of the player's characters, just in a meta way. So someone who has done enough of the adventures knows that it's all BS and that they are just God's puppets and they are being manipulated. So being as chaotic as possible is ultimately the only way to deal with it. So you're showing quote-unquote God that you can't be toyed with, basically. It's an even more meta way of saying, if you think outside of a show's context, that whole segment was like a meta commentary of having an adventure of the week. So yeah, I think Jax is really onto something here, and I think that he is completely right with this approach for handling the adventures. And I gotta say, I also think this is the reason why Zooble is sitting out of all of the adventures, because where Jax takes the approach of having fun and causing as much destruction as he can, Zooble tries to take more of a passive approach while still avoiding Caine's stupid games that he likes to play. But this brings us on to our next point. Caine isn't as powerful as we may think. Let me explain. In the first episode of the show, Ragatha gets glitched out by the abstracted Kaufmo, and she tells Pomni that Caine can fix her. Once Ragatha is taken to Caine, he fixes her right up. But Pomni looks at her arm and notices that, despite Caine not helping Pomni, it healed on its own. Now, this has led to many theories that if Ragatha couldn't heal herself, then Pomni definitely shouldn't have been able to, but she seemingly did, and shown by her confusion, it is most likely an accident. Now, if someone has these kind of special abilities in the circus, I think it would definitely be Pomni, and there is a lot of theories surrounding this at the moment, but I think it's safe to say that Pomni was a bit more involved in the creation of the amazing digital circus than she's let on. But you may be wondering, what does this have to do with Caine not being as powerful as we may think? Well, before I get to that, first I have to tell you about Zooble, and out of all the characters in the amazing digital circus, to me, she just seems the weirdest. She likes to skip out on whatever adventures the characters may be going on during that day, which if you know how Caine was, shouldn't be possible because he would be forcing her to do it basically. So why is Zooble allowed to skip out on the adventures? Well, I think that there might be something going on with Caine and Zooble that we don't know about yet. If you remember, in the first episode, Caine tells Pomni that he has all-seeing eyes all throughout the circus, but when he leaves in episode 2, we see Zooble coming out from behind the wall, remarking that she thought he would never leave. But obviously this wouldn't make any sense, because not only is standing behind a wall just a bad hiding spot, but if Caine has all-seeing eyes, he would have known she was there anyways. And it's not like the funeral Zooble was preparing was anything secret anyway. So I'm not sure what this is, but I think that Zooble is doing something way more sneaky that we are not aware about yet. But the point is, Caine can't fully keep track of what the circus members are up to. Then, obviously, when Pomni and Gummy Goo glitch into the behind-the-scenes area, Caine would have immediately wanted them to get out of there, because we know that Caine doesn't want circus members getting spoiled.
Yes! An alert on my Wacky Watch at this hour? Oh no! Someone's venturing out into the void! They'll get totally spoiled!
So this is clearly telling us that Caine isn't as powerful as we think, and if Pomni and Gummy Goo can get in the behind-the-scenes area that easily, imagine if the circus members snuck into a place with a real working exit door, if that theoretically existed. It's weird because we know that Caine can see on his Wacky Watch if someone is in the void, but he didn't notice them when they clipped under the map, which also makes me question, what places can Caine track the circus members? And unfortunately at this point, nothing is really confirmed, but this brings us to our last point. What is Caine hiding from us? Well, this is big, so hear me out. Caine is one of the original creators of CNA and the Amazing Digital Circus. While Caine doesn't act stranger than anyone else, if he was the Amazing Digital Circus's creator, it would make sense because no one around him know how to get there. It also goes to show why he'd be so self-conscious about his unfinished work in the digital circus, if he's keeping it a secret that he's the creator.
This is the void! We don't venture out into the void. Not even I know what's out there. I do have to apologize for lying about the exit. I knew how much all of you have been wanting there to be one, but, you know, I was having so much trouble figuring out what to put on the other side and ended up never quite finishing it.
Bit of a sidetrack here before I go on with the theory. I just noticed that Pomni and Caine go into the void in the pilot episode at exactly 4 minutes and 4 seconds. Anyways, I thought that was pretty cool. Back to what I was saying. When you're creating something, it's often embarrassing to show someone an unfinished draft of whatever you're working on. So if Caine had been the real creator of the Amazing Digital Circus, then it wouldn't be too far-fetched to think that he might have been the original creator of it in the first place. Something to note though is that when he's trying to convince them that he's telling the truth, to me, his tone almost sounds like he's lying, and he's just trying to convince others. What I mean is, Caine maybe isn't actually shy about the void at all, but is actually using excuses so people just won't go out there. I think that Caine is one of the original creators of the Amazing Digital Circus, or at least he partly owned the company that did, and if Caine shows any similarities to his biblical counterpart, then he may have done something bad to his brother and was punished for it. Perhaps the Digital Circus is that punishment, or maybe his punishment still awaits him. But I think that while he's trapped in the Digital Circus, or maybe he's not trapped at all, he likes to rule over the humans, and over time he's begun to see himself almost as God. And I'm not sure what this is about, but I think that Caine is hiding something big, and I'm sure that it won't be long until we figure out exactly what Caine is hiding.